It always amuses me, that wonderful animation at the beginning. I always forget. And then suddenly there it is, and I've seen it so many times. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, namaste. We have a remarkable person I have a remarkable person with me, and you have a remarkable person sitting in front of you this evening. You can see this smiling gentleman, Keoni Hanalei, who is amazing. Absolutely amazing. A true embodiment of the ancient Mū traditions of healing. And today, Keoni is going to reveal to us the extraordinary book that he has published very recently. I think it was August when the book first came out. Is that right, Keoni?
September. I believe it was September. Yeah, September.
Okay, I did do my job properly. You see, I did go onto the Amazon link, and I think it said August 2025, but we'll accept September. We were going to have this conversation a month ago, weren't we? And then suddenly something happened, and anyway, it's fine. We're here, and everything is exactly as it needs to be. Could you just give us context? Because, you could be anywhere in the world in this wonderful room of yours, but actually you're on one of the great islands, aren't you? So please tell us where you are and what your antecedents were.
Well, first, Stewart, mahalo. Thank you so much for inviting me back into this dialogue, this deep dialogue with you. I so enjoyed our previous connection and look forward to what we get to share today. I have to say also that the green light streaming behind you is just so feeling so supportive. It feels like you're just like beaming with this green light, Stewart. I am placed in Maui, in Ko Hawaii Pai'aina in the Hawaiian Islands. This is where I've been born and raised, and where my lineage, my family holds a very extensive lineage and presence in. And so in my language, we would call a place like this a piko, and a piko would be like where we're connected, like where we have a kind of etheric umbilical cord and where we are consistently nourished. And so I'm just so grateful to be able to be positioned in my piko so that I'm continuously supported as I share a lot of the things that I share.
How does it feel to... There's the fact, there's the data, but how does it feel to live this extraordinary lineage, which I perceive is over 20,000 years old in its ancestral knowledge? At least that's what has been traced by yourself and by your immediate forebears. So how does it feel?
Well, you never feel lonely. That's something that I don't feel I've really ever experienced, at least on a very personal level, feeling very lonely. I feel so incredibly supported. And you're right, the access that I do have as far as what is archived in my Oli Helu, or my genealogical chant, is extending to 18,000 BC. So that would be 20,000 years. And within every single generation, I have access to these beautiful stories. And that's, part of, I feel like, why I have the level of confidence that I have in sharing, because of the amount of support that I do feel streaming from my lineage. And in addition to just the life and the spirit of my islands is so very alive. There's a rhythm here, and that too is so incredibly supportive. It just feels like constantly being in a kind of dance with the rhythm of these islands.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'd love you to go further and just unpack the very first preface that you gave us, which is the nature of "I never feel lonely." What does that mean exactly? Why don't you feel lonely?
I feel
you're supposed to feel lonely, Keoni. I'm joking.
What's that?
Because I've lived alone for over 30 years. I'm in complete communion with the 12 angels of Atlantis. And so I never feel alone. And I spend a lot of time in aloneness, in stillness, in silence, in divine communion. And so I'd be fascinated to hear, because I absolutely believe you. Do you see? I feel you're a man of embodied integrity. So when you speak, I feel it's true. So tell us.
I want to share it like this. My grandmother, Keoni Hanalei, who supported in raising me and transferring a lot of the mo'okuauhau and the lineage to me, activated me in many ways. She would share that there's only one true requirement for a witch or warlock, and that is levitation. Now, at the surface, you may think like, oh, okay, right? Like even in pop culture, this means we got to float, we got to fly. But what levitation actually means on a very biopsychic, spiritual level is to experience buoyancy. And when I say I don't feel alone, it's because I feel held. I constantly feel held. And so like, that's my connection to that buoyancy and why I do feel like, my grandmother was able to support me in acknowledging my own levitation.
Mm. Beautiful, beautiful. I hear constantly, so many references that I totally cohere with. I hear constantly from the angels that we're acquiring such a streamlined cellular consciousness as a result of the radiance that's being shared with us through the solar deity opening in the way that it is, and how, of course, we've been through these extraordinary moons recently, that we're being levitated into love. And the buoyancy, of course, we know that the most important thing about being embodied, spiritual beings having a human experience, that we are weighted, we are gravitized, we are therefore real in that context. But at the same time, the transcendental nature of our consciousness, our spirit, leads us into this exquisite lightness of buoyancy and playfulness. You look like a really happy man. So your interconnectivity with spirit and all of the finer dimensions and the nuances thereof produce this wonderful glow around you. So you when you last came on to Deep Dialogues, we were sharing the firmament of Fern medicine. And I know that that's very much the springboard for everything that you do, isn't it? This wisdom that you carry through lineage. Perhaps you could just give us context so those people who are tuning in can really appreciate.
Yeah, well, certainly. And I really also love that you said, playfulness. And that's, for me, that's like my medicine, right? It's playfulness, lots of playfulness in my life, and meaningful playfulness and honest playfulness, not like forced playfulness. But that is definitely a nutrient that I access every day. But with Pu'a Ehu Ehu Fern medicine, this is archaic plant medicine that was activated within me because of my grandmother, Keoni Hanalei. But I also feel a very intuitive, very sovereign connection to it as well. It's not something that was like assigned to me in a way. But within the medicine of Pu'a Ehu Ehu Fern medicine, we believe that human emotions are coded within the spores of the ferns. And the reason why human emotions may be so incredibly important for us in this human experience is because, first, if we go out to the macro, there's recognition that we are living in an electrical universe, and perhaps electricity by way of perhaps the features of plasma. That's the base composite of this entire experience of this universe is electrical. Now, for the organic human being, it is our emotions that are the most electrical component of who and what we are. And so when I come into fluency of my own emotional experience, that is actually a way for me to connect with the universe as well. And many people call that the grid. And in order to connect to the grid, the universal grid, I must speak the language of electricity. And of course, as we know, right, our emotions, they're so stimulating and they're the stimulus of our experience. And so within Pu'a Ehu Ehu Fern medicine, there are 103 Hawaiian ferns that correlate to 103 human emotions. The most common question I get when it comes to Pu'a Ehu Ehu, and I open up the conversation about human emotions, is people ask me like, okay, what's the fern of love? Because that seems to be maybe, right, the most captivating perceived emotion. And my response to that is always quite anticlimactic, because there is no one fern of love, because love is the culmination of all human emotions. And so coming into fluency of all human emotions is actually what brings us into the perception or the totality of love. And therefore, it is our job, in a way, to come into fluency of our emotions in order to transfigure, in order to transcend, because that nutrient of love is that to which qualifies the transcendence and the transfiguration.
Mm-hmm. Keep going. Because you see, it's interesting. You mentioned the word fluency 3 times. And when you mention it, it has huge resonance. And so my understanding, as I feel it, is that you're speaking of universal flow, and that when you are riding, when you are surfing, when you are buoyant within universal flow, there is this extraordinary fluency that takes place through the whole of your being, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. You become one with the universe. Is that accurate?
I would say so, Stewart. And, specific with the Poa Ehu fern medicine, let's just an example of an emotion and a fern. There's a fern called akolea. It's a fern of wonder, so emotional wonder. What I love about having conversations with the ferns, right? And I invite everyone, no matter, you don't have to be in Hawaii with specific Hawaiian ferns. There are, all ferns are related, interconnected. In fact, some people will send me photos of ferns that show up in Russia, and I'm able to identify the closest Hawaiian relative, and therefore what that fern, that emotion may actually represent. But this fern called akolea is the emotion of wonder. So in its spores, it holds the codes of wonder. I think perhaps, Stewart, before I go any further with that, I want to give some context as to why the ferns hold the emotions at all. And it's because what we perceive to have occurred is that when we came into what is known as a spiritual dark age, there is concern that the human emotion, remember, this is our connection to the electrical universe. This is our electrical experience. There was concern that it may become corrupted. Now, the ferns of the whole world, they're the only species on our planet to experience what is known as evolutionary stasis, which means they've met their evolutionary ceiling. They don't need to evolve. They're completely evolved. Why is that important? It's because if I've completely evolved, I'm no longer required to take in data. You and I, as evolving human beings, we're taking in a lot of data, and it can cause a lot of confusion and also corruption. But with the ferns, because they're not required to take in any data, they cannot become corrupted. And so in the chants, in the stories, the ferns volunteered. They said, we cannot become corrupted. We understand that the humans are concerned that the human emotions will become corrupted. We'll hold them. We'll carry them in their purity until the time is hemolele, or perfect, to be gifted back to you. And, just the fact that you and I are having a conversation would suggest that that time of hemolele, or perfection, is upon us, and likely because we are in some kind of event. Some kind of event. I may have something to share about that in correlation to the behavior of the ferns right now. But with that knowledge, now I want to go back to akolea, the fern of wonder. So wonder, one of the things to which akolea shared to me about wonder is that it's about non-control. And so when you share about like being in buoyancy and being in levitation, it's a great lesson for us to remember how to open our hearts up more to curiosity and to awe. And I feel like in the world to which we exist in, and I'll just speak for myself, that I'm observing that, there's so much shutting, borders, closing down. So many are shutting down because perhaps we've been disrupted of that inherent curiosity. It's like the greatest vision of wonder that I've ever experienced in my life is looking in an infant's eyes. Because when you look into an infant's eyes, it's like sparkly. It's like a light show, right? And I'm like, oh, that's wonder. because that infant is in absolute curiosity without the disruption of control. And so that has been one fern and one emotion that's been quite loud in the collective right now, and inviting us and saying, look, seems to be turbulence in the world that does not invalidate our ability to remain curious.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So many questions. Would you do you feel that there is a difference between emotion and feeling?
That's a great question, brother. I feel like a feeling is a response of the emotion. And so it's as if the emotion is informing a feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Emotion is energy in motion. I mean, that's literally what its root is in Latin. And then I believe there is information for us to move into the higher frequencies, the higher vibrational realm, where there is just pure feeling. And I feel that that's what you're speaking of. That's my experience, at least, of the innocent of a child suddenly, oh, wow, you know, almost for the first time, that vitalization of when the space-time continuum distorts, and there's the pinnacle point of that joyous experience, which also teaches the cellular nature of the babe, the child, the infant, something. I spend the whole of my life seeking wonder, seeking wonder, and to be in awe of the magnificent, to be in awe of the magic, of the mysticism, of the majesty of the universe, and all the beings that populate, as it were, the beings that are non-corporeal, that are, that are in spirit. It seems that the magic of the fern within the plant kingdom is very unique. Mm-hmm. So they are the record keepers of the information, which is so pure, because we know it's become hugely distorted, particularly over the last 400 years, in the development of the left brain consciousness, what I call the cerebral consciousness. And therefore, we've moved away from the metaphoric consciousness that we see really prevalent before Isaac Newton said, no, the Earth is merely a lump of matter hurtling through space, which I think was around 1623. So that was quite earlier on. Whereas the body of wisdom that I associate most within English Hermeticism is the Elizabethan period, which was why, as an actor and as a voice coach, I was so drawn to the sound of Shakespeare. And then, the history is that I became involved in the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, the building that would have stood on the south bank of the River Thames in 1597. Directly opposite St. Paul's Cathedral, which is Lud's Hill. Lud is the Celtic god, the male god. And of course, the Thames is Temasis, the Black Isis. So we have the meeting of the female and the male presence. However, so moving back into the natural world, so when we look into Fern, there is a simplicity, there is an innocence, there is a vast wisdom, but very different from treeness. Do you also have wisdom about trees? Because the trees are, I feel, revealing their songs, their ancient songs. They're speaking to us. The dryads are really coming forth and sharing. Is that in your experience?
It's interesting you just asked about trees, because I have recently been more aware of trees. I have this really great giant ficus on my property. That I've channeled that it enjoys being called apo. In the language of Hawaii, apo means to hug, because the giant ficus, it grows almost like a banyan, where it has these roots that hang down, and I just love to embrace them. And so I have been communing with trees, and one of the things that have been coming to me from trees is this encouragement and reminder of how to cope. Let me explain a little bit about that, because trees, they can't run away. When they are faced with adversity, they know how to cope. They can withstand it. And I feel like that's a message that's coming from the trees right now, is reminding human beings how to cope, because my concern is that we are outsourcing ourselves so much that before we know it, we're in transhumanism. And then that's going to be consensual, which would mean it's fair. If it's consented, that's one of the primary laws of the universe. According to the Mū doctrines, there's two primary laws. The first primary law is masculine, and that is do no harm. Do no harm. What I feel about do no harm that's interesting, at least in the United States, is that it's something that's talked about. It's something that's honored. We even have that present in the Hippocratic Oath. And, that would be heart-centered. That's why in America, we place our hands on our heart very often. And so that masculine law seems to be at least of interest. Whether or not it's actually honored is questionable, but at least it's talked about. But the feminine law of the universe, according to the Mū doctrines, is not very present at all, and that's consent. Consent. And so, I feel like one of the ways to which we can come back into our skill of coping is to once again be very aware of what we're consenting to. Otherwise, and I'll just speak for myself, this is where I felt so overpowered by so much, because I'm not aware, I'm not engaging and I'm participating in actually offering my consent. And so when something like transhumanism just shows up and all of a sudden we're all in it, it's likely because we've consented to it as a collective. And when the universe observes something like that, it's actually fair. And so like my kupuna would say, if it honors the first and second primary law of life, then that would be fair, regardless of what the consequence is.
Mm-hmm. So do no harm, consent, and the third being?
What is the third, brother?
The third law. Well, you're using, I completely cohere with what you've just said. But of course, your terminology is your own unique terminology, which is I'd rather meet you in that realm rather than suggest anything else.
Well, here's what I want to say about that, because we have the feminine and we have the masculine, and then we have this androgynous energy, right? Which could be considered like the holistic self. Because even in my book, ULU, what we're doing is we're taking the spinal cord and we're giving them three sections within the spinal cord. We have the coccyx, the sacral, the lumbar, which is considered the unihipili or inherent feminine. Then we have the thoracic vertebrae, which is considered the masculine. And then we have the cervical vertebrae, which is the inherent androgynous self, what we call that aumakua. And so it's as if we take do no harm and consent, and then how is that indistinguishable from one another? It could be love. That could be the third law. And what it could be suggesting is that in order to attain or to enjoy the third law is to first ensure that there is fluency in the law of the masculine, which is do no harm, and then the law of the feminine, which is consent. And, like even in the book, I do not create like a definitive translation of even love, because I feel like love itself, right, is like this anomaly that it's going to be a personal relationship that we each have with it ourselves, which would ensure that we're not succumbing to plagiarism or to fraud. It's something that's very authentic in our experience with it. And so the invitation could be with this third law is, okay, for all of us, take do no harm and then invite in consent. And then what does that result as? And then that likely could be that third law.
Mm-hmm. The way that I meet it, as you share, is it moves me into the field of unconditionality, of unconditional love, which is boundless. So we feel the vastness of what is being offered us, that we are record keepers of, but how as we know, our social process, our educational process, our cultural process has distorted through the development of the ego and the male warrior presence that has created all of that stuff that it's created. We don't even have to identify it. All we have to do is look towards the Middle East. And that the configuration of unconditionality comes in because we know that the only thing that will heal the war, which at core is about revenge, is forgiveness through unconditionality. And if we can learn how to be forgiving in our unconditionality, that's why I feel that the gift of Ho'oponopono is so extraordinary, that it's come at this time. And I say that with great reverence to the tradition of Ho'oponopono, but it comes to really alert us to what the possibility of unconditionality is all about. And therefore we become boundless, except, as you were saying earlier, we know our boundaries. Because if we don't know our boundaries, we just spill out. And that's the chaos in the world, isn't it, really, where we're spilling out all over the place, where people, I find constantly I'm saying to people, but where are your boundaries? Where, particularly for those who come forth, as I'm sure you meet a lot of people who are sensitized, who are very empathic. And, one of the reasons why they're being constantly polluted by the excrescence of what electricity can be about is because they don't have boundaries. How do you meet that?
Yeah, so let's bring up another fern, Hapu'ui'i. And this fern, Hapu'ui'i, holds the codes of an emotion known as preservation. And so a great way to translate what preservation is in like a rational way is, just as you shared, it's boundaries. And what I love about the message of Hapu'ui'i, when I hold counsel with Hapu'ui'i, it shares that boundaries is more parts invitation than it is rejection, because we get to teach someone how to properly honor us. That's the invitation. The very first lesson and then the last lesson that my grandmother shared with me is, she said, boy, don't assume we know how to love you. You get to teach us. And, one of the things that Hapu'ui'i shares, it says that we're all going to need and we get to remember how to be facilitators. And ultimately facilitator in really teaching people how to properly love us. And so with boundaries, it's more parts invitation than it is rejection. And one of the principles of offering a boundary is, before I offer a no, what's the yes? Otherwise, someone's going to shut down. They're going to receive that as rejection. And so as I clarify a no first, what's the yes? And therefore, I'm always giving an invitation on how I'm being properly loved. And gosh, Stuart, if we all had that skill, right, to give our yeses before our nos, I don't think war could stand up to that.
Wow. From as our Jewish friends would say, from your mouth to God's ears. And particularly over the great kingdom of Israel and what some people call Palestine. Amazing. So it's very intriguing the way that you present us to the realm of the plant kingdom, and how there are 103 emotions contained within 103 ferns. And this information you've written, is that so?
Yes, I don't have a book on it yet, but that's definitely something that I plan on doing. It's something that I've extensively shared. If you go to my website, I'll hold many ceremonies. In fact, what I'll do is I'll dedicate an entire ceremony to a fern and to an emotion. I call that the emotional series. And so I have a whole bunch of ceremonies where we just dedicate ourselves to a fern, an emotion, and then I really rally the community. I love my ceremonies to be assemblies where people can exchange their thoughts, their ideas, their experiences as well. I love to say it like this, Stuart, especially because I have access to such an archaic lineage, that maybe it's intimidating to some people when I present knowledge and information. And I love to say that I am a authority, I'm not the authority. And so, I love to always invite people to also contribute what they know to be true as well, because ultimately we're just all sharing notes.
Yeah. Well, that intrigues me, that you would be seen to be the authority that you carry is your sovereignty, because you really know what this information is from an embodied witness. I don't see that as being intimidating at all. I see it as being refreshing. And it's obvious, that you have a quality of personality which is not divisive, it's completely inclusive. So, and I mean, look at you, the whole of your vibe is just like, everybody, don't you all just want to go and hug Keoni right now? It's, you have this extraordinary force. I do have information for you, but I won't go into it now, about how there may be a mechanism that can be used to help with the process that you've just identified. However, I feel compelled to urge you to produce videos about each of the ferns, because I noticed, for example, ladies and gentlemen, you must go. Well, in fact, Ryan, could you bring up Keoni's website, pahola.net? Because on the website, there are these amazing photographs of you holding ferns in your hands, and you have the most amazing hands. I mean, there's the website, everybody. These extraordinary hands. The life within your hands. There are so many lines within your hands. A palmist would have a field. But the way that and they're strong male hands that are full of vitality. And the way that you hold the fern, it's almost as though your hand yields as you hold the fern. We see the distinct nature of the fern photographs. I just feel that each of those ferns, I urge you for a ritual in video.
That sounds like a great idea, brother. And I love, Stewart, you're so intuitive too in like the artistic sort of protocol, because of course with the ferns, right, one of the identifiers of ferns is by what is known as a sori, and a sori is the actual spore design, and it's known as the fingerprint. And so artistically, the reason why I showcase my hand with the ferns, because I'm connecting with how we're identified with, of course, as you said, with the lines on my hands in correlation to with the sori on the ferns. So yeah, good eye.
Well, it's like, for me, as I was looking this afternoon, it was evening here in this recording that we're making, and I saw your hands and I thought, wow, your hands are like landscapes. There's so much life within them. There is all of your history, all of your lineage is there within your hand, and then the gentleness of the fern on top. I was very taken by it. But then, that's how significant bodies are for me. And I've been working with the human body to bring it to an optimized state for many, many, many years, principally, of course, in relation to the focus of the great public speaker or the great actor. How does the actor open his or her body to such an extent that they become a transformative witness and shapeshift? The ego is dispelled and they shapeshift into the life of the being that they're playing. How do we do that? Well, great actors transform themselves. So we know our bodies. We know how to do that from the soles of our feet to the very top of our heads. And it was interesting what you were saying just now also about the elements within the body, because I'd love us to go deeper into spinal technology, into ULU, because it's so fascinating that it comes at this time as we really begin to examine that we're being invited to develop a pranic cord so that we can really feel the neurology of the spine becoming a conductor for the forces that we're being given, so that we can actually live within the central plane, within which I believe is right here, although we know the pelvis is the base, is the center of gravity in our bodies, but coming into the heart and feeling how the heart works. So Why was it significant to bring the book out at this time about spinal technology?
Yeah, mahalo. So ulu, it's when I access the Oli Helu, or the genealogical chant, and we go all the way to 18,000 BC to an ancestor known as Mahat. Mahat wanted this to be very clear, ulu, and that ulu is essential for, and I'm going to say it like this. Before we can spiritualize as human beings, okay? Before we can spiritualize, we must first materialize. We must first fully materialize in order to spiritualize. In fact, even the word spiritualize, it doesn't make sense unless there's also materialization. And so with Ulu, what we're doing is we're unlocking the 33 codes within the human vertebrae, which gives us 33 codes of how to properly materialize so that we can ultimately spiritualize. When we go and we move up, so in medicine, they move down. And so with Ulu, we move up. We start with the coccyx and we move all the way up. When we start in the coccyx and what we call the unihipili, this is the coccyx, the sacral, and the lumbar vertebrae. There are 14 codes. These are the 14 feminine codes. And so we actually begin our saga, our huakai, with coming into the goddess of the self. From there, because it's foundational, then we come into the thoracic vertebrae, or the 12 codes, which we call the 12 actions. And these codes, supported by the goddess, supported by feminine energy as foundational, begin to build infrastructure. So the thoracic vertebrae is actually the only place in the vertebrae where we see ribs. And the ribs are even poetically symbolic of infrastructure, of not just infrastructure, but protection. And so we see that it is our inherent masculine, the hero, who actually begins to design the life, coming from poetry into actual livable life. And so another word for that is practicality. And then as we go all the way to the cervical vertebrae, the 7 exalted codes of the cervical vertebrae, which also encompasses the skull. And so whatever the skull holds, including the brain glands and masses. And so the pineal and the pituitary gland would be actually considered part of the cervical vertebrae. This is the Aupakua, or the holistic self. And interestingly, the actual location of the cervical vertebrae, according to the Mū doctrines, is 3 inches above the head, which is beautifully symbolic, because it's the only one that's location is actually out of our body, which means that that's actually where we begin to spiritualize. And so first, the goddess must be attended to first and foremost. And this is why perhaps patriarchy is so problematic, because we're stuck. We're going back and forth in the 12 codes, because we need to be supported by the goddess in order for the uhane, or the masculine, to experience the maturation into the cervical vertebrae.
Keep going. It ties in absolutely with the relativity of the last 400, 500 years. Because after all, when we go back, I'm speaking as a Western individual based in the Hermetic principles, because that was my ancestry and that was my training. At the age of 15, I went to Egypt for the first time, and this is where I met my master in the form of the god Thoth. And so it is Thoth who has taught me for now, how many years is that? 60 years. Yeah, I was 15, so at 60, I'm now nearly 75. And in the Hermetic principles, we have earth, water, air, and fire that correspond with the vertebral structure within the body. And when we go back to the principle I really wanted to share, was that when we go back to that period, of which we know as medievalism, there was the great belief in the fact that Mother Nature was sacred. And therefore, when we were out of balance, we would go into Mother Nature and we would sing, dance around a spring, around a yew tree, around a copse of trees, whatever it may be, a river course, and we would feel better because we would feel invested through participation and praise. We would actually feel invested in the anima mundi, in the animating principle of the universe, i.e. in God's breath within Mother Nature. But that was outlawed in medieval universities in the early part of the 17th century, because after all, we were being told by the scientists that the Earth was merely a lump of matter hurtling through space. So we literally desacralized Divine Mother. And now here we are resacralizing. And isn't it interesting that sacred and the sacral, that there's this resonance as well, because it coming from the Latin root, the sacral vertebrae. So we're beginning to really find a way of rebalancing. Within each of the 33 codes, are there sounds?
There are.
There chants?
There are. I would love to offer them. Yes. Yeah. So correlating with the actual like codes or the nutrients of every single 33 vertebrae is correlating an actual sound. And with the sound or the tone, it's meant to support us in unlocking it. And so my grandmother taught me that with the tones, I'm going to do it in the appropriate way, which is I'm going to say it twice in the proper going up, and then I'm going to say it once going down, because there's a protocol with ensuring that we can access the spinal cord. The first is we need to unlock them. And so when we apply the tones the first time, we're unlocking. And then when we apply the tones the second time, we are plugging in. Now that they're unlocked, now they can be plugged in specifically to Akasha. So now that we can actually behave as this channel for this information to infuse us once again. And then the third time that I utter it, I go in reverse because we're going to ground it now. And I love also the poetry of that too, because we're bringing it back into the goddess. Because, and as you said so beautifully with the pelvis, right, or the lumbar spine area, it's what holds the weight of our body. And so many of us forget that it's actually the goddess that holds us. And to allow ourselves to be held by the goddess once again. And for me in my own internal masculine, the uhane, I remember like Stewart, when I finally allowed myself to come out of the trance of the hysteria of the external conditions, and my masculine is finally able to look at me, we were able to breathe together. I said, brother, what is it that you need? And the response I had from my masculine is, I want to be held. And so that was me reorienting, reuniting my own masculine with the goddess once again, and then reunite me with that buoyancy and that levitation. And so I would be so honored to honor these tones with everyone. The invitation for the audience and for you, Brother Stewart, is to close your eyes and inward gaze, begin to just connect with your iwi kuomo, or your spinal cord, and have fun with just moving your gaze up and down the spinal cord, all the way down to the coccyx, coming all the way up through the thoracic into the cervical vertebrae. And remember, the cervical vertebrae encompasses the skull. And so also connect with all those brain glands and masses, vagus nerve, pineal gland, pituitary, thalamus, hypothalamus, medulla oblongata, and just trace it, track it, going up and down. Breathe a couple times into it. Let those spinal cords expand. Feeling the spinal cord as this obelisk of the self. Some people even love to reference it as the Jed of the human body. And I'm going to ask that we all gather together at the coccyx, at the tailbone. Drop, drop, drop. And as I utter these tones, I will invite us to move ourselves up the spinal cord until we reach that 3 inches above the head, where the aumakua, that cervical vertebrae, is positioned. Starting with the coccyx. Journey with me now. Ka, lu, ko, ha, li, on, hi, va, I, mi, ku, ma, she, gra, esh, un, ja, hesh, jut, gol, ampa, se, nut, resh, vo, st, imanut, geeste ut, hex, ama, ra. Unlock, 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 unlock. Inhale through the nose, hold. Exhale through the mouth. Drop, 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 back down to the coccyx. Unite with the goddess. The second utterance of the tones is to plug in. The invitation, if you consent to, is to plug into Akasha. Allow the self to be this channel of information and data that will support in our process of materialization and the exaltation of our spiritualization. Journey with me now. Kalu ko hali on hiva imiku mashe graesh unja hesh jut gol ampat set nut resh vo set imanut geeste ut hex ama ra. Plug, 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 plug. Inhale through the nose. Hold, hold, hold. Focus on 3 inches above the head. As I utter the tones for a third time, we are going to ground it. Journey with me now. Ra, ama, hex, geeste ut, imanut, se, vo, resh, nut, se, pa, am, gol, jut, hesh. Ja, und, esh, gra, she, ma, kumi, iva, hi, on, li, ha, ko, lu, ka. Feel so incredibly connected to this planet, ki, to the iron crystal core of this planet. Gravity meets gravity in equal measure. There can never be a measurable difference. Aloha ma, aloha ma, aloha ma. When I offer myself this adjustment, I love to also play with the iwi ko mo'o. If you're able to just like begin to flex it, feel the friendliness of it, becoming more limber, more flexible, more pliable, more generous in that to which is willing to share.
Wow. I was so within the experience that I forgot where I was for a moment. So I'm back. That was amazing, Keoni. Amazing. Fantastic. And when I can feel how you're surrounded by these extraordinary beings, both of your lineage and also interstellar beings who are awakening this rich intelligence at this time within you as custodian, but also with your generous sharings that are so remarkable. They bring us forth. And so your book is a journey into the cosmology of how, as you're examining, in order to spiritualize, we need to materialize. We cannot spiritualize without material. Well, that's the substance of this project, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The spirit became matter. In the beginning was the sound, and the sound was made flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. So we come into body, and it seems by coming into body and into the density of weight, space, and time, and the perplexity of duality, because as we know in contemporary society, duality has become a neuroses rather than a glorification, the diversity that's so fascinating, that we're being brought back into the health of our bodies through the remarkable nature of what you're sharing, and so that we can really feel ourselves in contact with the reality rather than the fantasy of what being a spiritual being, having a human experience, is all about. And it's pretty obvious as we see you, as we hear you, because you are so vital, you are so alive in every part of your body, even though we're just seeing your torso and your head, that you're so grounded and alive. We can feel how every corpuscle and every pore and every cell is informing the totality of what you're all about as a radiating vehicle for this extraordinary information. It's a great honoring to receive what you've just done for us. That was really very, very remarkable. And so from the core of my heart and the very bottom of my soul, or the well of my soul, I thank you for what you've just shared. And I believe in it so utterly that it's coming home. I feel it's home, and so much of what the sounds are also within the formants that I hear in Egypt. So many of the syllables or the vowels, or moving into a sound like ka, 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 and it's interesting you were talking about the element of the spine in one of the references that you used, that we have the digit in ancient Egypt, which we can see. I'll send you a photograph of the digit, the geometry of the digit, which is really the backbone of Osiris, and believed to be the central axis of the planet. There's an extraordinary series of hieroglyphs and embossed carvings in the temple of Abydos, which is considered to be the spiritual heart of ancient Egypt, created by a master pharaoh known as Seti I, who was a great magician, where there was a blending of these essential cultures, because I feel that Egypt grew out of the Atlantean kingdoms, and here you are celebrating the Mū kingdoms, which, of course, for many people, they will think of Mu as being Lemuria. But, of course, as we know, Lemuria is actually a romantic name that was cooked up in the 19th century, and that actually we're talking about Mu. And the sound of Mu is so crucial, isn't it, with the Mu. Again, a sacred syllable which resonates the perfection of what your ancestors were all about and how they're reaching through you to teach all of this. What's the next project? Where does this all go? What's your super objective?
Yeah, and that's so beautiful, Stewart. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I'm so glad that you were able to share your experience too with the tone. So thank you for that. What I would love to do is to continue sharing the medicine of Ulu. I have a free membership online that everyone can join, and I share live ceremonies. There's replays. There's a lot of information to just support us in beginning to explore what Ulu is, and perhaps even what does it mean for me to fully materialize. One of, I would say, a beautiful poetic ambassador of Ulu is, the prophet known as Jesus, because when Jesus said that saying at the time of the crossing, "Tetelestai," it is finished, it is accomplished. I believe that was in reference to the materialization of the self, which then allowed this entity to come into its transfiguration or spiritualization. And, one of the things that I find so interesting about that reference of Jesus is leading up to the point of the crossing, there was such incredible feeling, right? With the procession to the actual place of the crossing, lots of suffering, lots of pain. We can feel that we are all experiencing that in a way. We're just having a very sensational experience. And for us to allow that all to become integrated within the body so that we can properly spiritualize. And, one thing about the word Mū, so in the Hawaiian language, which is an offshoot of the Mū dialect. But the Hawaiian language is the only language in the world where it is comprised of something, an artistry, you can even say it's magic, known as the kauna. And the kauna is reverse speak, meaning that every word and every name in the Hawaiian language, if you reverse it, it holds its deeper hidden truth.
Wow.
The only language in the world. And so we can take Mū and we can do the kauna, we can reverse it. And with the kauna, when you reverse, a word must always end in a vowel. And so when we reverse Mū, we have U, M, and in order to add a vowel, any time that there's an opportunity for the word to become a palindrome, that is naturally selected. And therefore, we would choose to resource a U. And so now with the reverse speak of Mū, we have umu, umu, and umu literally means to mature. And so Mū, right, the hidden in the culture, the civilization, the essence of Mū is materialize. You got this. Materialize, fully materialize. And you're also going to experience this thing called the Atlantean timeline, which is only going to support in the process of materialization as well. But just remember to fulfill it, finish it, complete it, not repeat it.
It's really cool. It's great that you have been with us in these moments that we're sharing. Although we're, as humans, within a time phase, the recording is not. It will be listened to by people all over the planet in different time zones, hopefully in many years to come. So you began to illustrate for us how you're taking these practices and allowing them to be emitted into the world with a great deal of sacred reverence. So we go to your website where we find the resources, and then we can actually see when the initiations take place, yes?
Yes, brother. And, the book, the ULU book, it's subtitled as a guidebook because it's also to support us in that portal. And so as you guide us through that process, you also have this other reference. And part of the way to which I present ULU, which is exactly how my grandmother presented it to me, is I love to give lots of room for people to have their own relationship to it. And so although there are like what you would call like an index and whatnot, it's also opportunity for you to come back into the remembrance of your own spinal cord and then start to cultivate a relationship with that so you can lead your own process of materialization.
Beautiful. And the book can be acquired through Amazon. So, ladies and gentlemen, in case you get lost, please go on your own quest. It's very simple. You just go to amazon.com or amazon.co.uk or wherever you are in the world, you can access Amazon. And if you, the actual title of the book is ULU Spinal Technology. And of course, you can see Keoni's name here. So just feed that information. But if for those of you who get lost, we will make sure that the information is in the footnotes below the video when the video is published this week. So, don't worry, you won't get lost. Well, our time has come to a close, a point of completion. And yet, it's as though we have been at the most extraordinary feast. And I feel every part of my being is replete, is full of delight, that I want to go away now and muster. And it's sort of late in the evening here, so I know I'm going to be mustering it all the way through the night. And so on behalf of all the people that are tuning in, and I hope hundreds of thousands of people are going to be tuning in, I just want to thank you, brother, for the generosity of your spirit and the absolute clarity with which you disembark the information for us, because it's absolutely exquisite. We feel you completely revealed within the work. There are no masks, there is no ego. It is just a pure, undiluted flow of, it's like experiencing in varying speeds and rhythms, beautiful spring water that's absolutely pure, that is coming out of the mountainside somewhere in Hawaii, somewhere, maybe even on Maui. So I thank you for that. And I will be in Hawaii next year, so I will make sure that I hound you.
Yes.
So that I can stand in your field and tell you how remarkable you are. I feel such connection with you. I hope you don't mind me saying that. It's just really exquisite to be with you.
I'm so honored to say that, brother. I'm so honored. Thank you so much for you to share that. And I'm like blushing. Mahalo. I would love to exchange an energy with you, Brother Stewart. You yourself are such an incredible channel. And to make contact with you would be such an honor, brother. So yes.
Yeah. And there are sharings that I would love to be able to contribute into the experience of the wonderment of what you've shared with us. There are many, many, particularly about, of course, this experience that I've had with sound, which initially came out of soundlessness, out of absolute silence. And then I found sound, and how I've gone on conducting soundfulness, for the last 45, 50 years. Bless you. Thank you so much. And on behalf of everybody, tune into this remarkable man's work. Ryan, could you just bring up the website once again, please? Stay where you are, please. Namaste, namaste, everybody. And look forward to seeing you very soon. Take care. Thank you, Ryan.